Hello, Mark Pearson, Executive and Artistic Director of the College Light Opera Company. Welcome to Off the Clock, a weekly show where I get to interview CLOC alums. Off the Clock is made possible by a generous gift from Hope Lincoln Baker. This week, I got to catch up with three amazing humans, Val Gebert, David Ward, and David Weiler. Let's hear what they had to say. I'm so happy to be here with three wonderful, wonderful people, wonderful guests, juggernauts of clock history, if I may. Conductor and music director Val Gebert, stage director and coach David Ward, and musical director and choral conductor David Weiler. Thank you all very much for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So I thought we'd start out with just some introductions to let people know who you all are. Maybe give us a little information about where you are, what your career is currently, and a little bit about how you got there. Val, would you like to start us off?
Well, it's apropos since I'm actually leaving my career. 2020 came at a very opportune time for me. I have been traveling with Broadway touring musicals since 1989. And it has come to pass that Broadway touring musicals are getting a much younger crowd to do the work. And the work has changed. It's no longer stand-up conductors in front of orchestras. It's keyboards and computers, which I did one show like that, and I enjoyed it. But they don't necessarily think of someone my age when they're wanting to staff a production. So I'm basically retiring right now from a lifelong career of being a touring Broadway musical music director on the road in traveling around the world and the United States. And today you find me in Georgia. I had to do some family business in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm on my way back to my new home of Chicago. That's where I'm going to relocate. So that's where I'll be.
Great.
I picked Chicago because it had so many theater opportunities. I'm not quitting theater, but I'm just not going to be on the road anymore. And Chicago has tons of small theater groups, community theater, Broadway shows that come through, just many opportunities. And then COVID hit. So we'll see what happens, but that's my story.
Thanks, Val.
Sure.
David Ward, do you want to go up next?
Sure. Well, I was in CLOC in the vocal company in 1982 and 83, back in the old days. In fact, that's where I met David my first summer. He was an associate conductor as well as he just started conducting. And I met Val in 1983. If I recall correctly, you conducted me in Guys and Dolls.
No, my darling, you were Tevye.
Oh, was it Tevye? Was it Fiddler on the Roof you were thinking? Okay, I remember what it was.
1982, we were all there together.
Was that 1982? Oh my Lord.
Yes.
Don't get old. It's not pleasant. So, but it's funny, the reason I remember Guys and Dolls was you were helping me with my Jewish accent to play Nathan Detroit in Guys and Dolls.
But of course, I lived in New York for a long time.
Well,
so
and I was just moving there. So it was, came from sort of a protected little lily white community out in Jersey. So, to move to New York and discover all the fabulousness of Jewish culture and gay culture and every other kind of culture was divine. Anyway, so I left the College of Worcester and I came to CLOC those 2 summers and really changed my life. I became a professional opera singer and sang as a basso buffo for 25 years. I sang all over the country, regional houses. I sang at New York City Opera a number of times at Lincoln Center. I sang in China and in Japan, which I loved. And then the business started tightening, and in 2011, I went back to graduate school and got my master's in opera directing, vocal pedagogy, and vocal performance at the University of Houston. And that was I was 51, and my whole life just changed. I became I'd always been a performer, and suddenly I was a teacher, and I was leading, and I was guiding, and I was advising, and I took to it like a fish out of water. My mother had been a teacher her whole life. My father has been a shrink, so it felt like very natural to be working with students like this, and I discovered I loved it. So I graduated from University of Houston and just kept getting directing jobs and teaching jobs. And in 2013, B&Ers Haslam called me and they said, John Lucas, our beloved John Lucas, is ill and we need someone to direct HMS Pinafore. And I came back and it was thrilling. And I guess that was 2013, I think. So it's been fabulous to be back and directing shows and working with the young people. I love it. And right now I'm in central Pennsylvania at my sister's house. I live in New York City on 42nd Street and 9th Avenue. So I'm right in the heart of everything. And it's just nice to be out of the city and be with nieces and nephews and young people and all that good stuff.
Thanks, David. Can you remind us, just for some of us, what a buffo is?
Oh yeah, a basso buffo in Italian opera is the comic bass. Basso means bass, buffo means clown, and there's a whole repertoire of basso buffo roles. I'm the funny guy. You know, I had a conductor say to me once, I don't care how well you sing as long as you're funny. So
to think that you're the funny guy, that's hard to imagine.
I know, imagine that. And so there's most of those roles are in Donizetti and Rossini, and but Verdi wrote some great buffo roles. He wrote Falstaff and Fra Militone. Those are great buffo roles. And I do the little character parts in Puccini because he always wrote little buffo parts, like Benoit Alcindoro in La Boheme and the sacristan in Tosca. So things like that.
Great, thanks. And David Weiler.
Hello there. I've just finished my 36th year of teaching. I'm a music professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I live in Henderson, Nevada, which is a nice little suburb of Las Vegas. I serve as the co-director of choral studies, built a choral program from the ground up, and now I have a colleague with whom I share the choral program. And I'm also doing administrative work now. I'm the associate director of the School of Music. And I first came to CLOC right out of my undergraduate work in 1979. I was a rehearsal pianist that first summer, and then returned in 1980 as an associate conductor. Greener than green, but very enthusiastic and willing to learn. And in fact, I think this week is probably the 40th anniversary of my debut in the Highfield Pit, because I conducted the matinee performance of the opening week of the season in 1980, which was HMS Pinafore. And I continued as an associate conductor in 80, 81, and 82. But the Haslams also gave me shows of my own to conduct during those 3 years. And then by 1983, I was a principal conductor for CLOC. And I've been at CLOC ever since, off and on, with some noticeable absences along the way. But my heart has been tied to CLOC now for 41 years.
That's great. Thank you, David. Val, how did you start out at CLOC?
Well, I replaced somebody who finked.
No, that never happens.
Yes, for those of you who don't know what that means, that to think means to not show up for your contract because you got something else at the last minute, probably. And I replaced a man named Ted Sperling, who is a big hotshot in the musical theater world now, but he couldn't come back for his second summer. Was it his second, David?
He had not conducted yet at CLOC. He only conducted at CLOC, as far as I know, in 1984.
Well, I came in 82.
So maybe he was contracted in 1982 and things.
Yeah. So I knew people who were actors at CLOC, and I knew the work director, Woody Howard. He and I and Kathy Morath went to Brown University, where John Lucas was director. And it was a natural fit when Woody just said to the producer, B. Haslam, hey, I know this gal named Val Gebert. She does stuff at Brown, and she's good and she's probably available and would come in a moment's notice. So I showed up and I did, what was my GNS that year?
The Sorcerer.
I did The Sorcerer. David, you were Wellington Wells.
John Wellington Wells. Oh, that was so much fun.
Oh my God, the eggs and the ham.
And the rollicking buns.
Woo-hoo-hoo, didn't we know it?
And the gay Sally Lunn.
Yes. I can still sing those choruses. It's amazing. And I wasn't even in the chorus, but they were so much fun. Yeah, I can still sing them.
I enjoy that you pointed out, and I wasn't even in the chorus.
Oh.
Yes, David. So I started out as a replacement, but I fell in love with CLOC for so many reasons, not the least of which these two other gentlemen were there, and we had a ball. Who knew that we were going to be friends for, 40 years now? Is it 40?
Yeah.
Almost? Oh my goodness, it's just amazing. And I've visited David in, where were you living in the South? Tucson?
Yeah, I was lived in we saw each other in Tucson. I saw you when you came through on the road with Adam's family in Houston.
All right.
We had dinner. I saw that, and I've seen you elsewhere, but I just can't remember.
Yes, but I mostly know David Weiler better because I lived with him in Las Vegas while I was doing The Lion King at Mandalay Bay Theater in the casino, and David so graciously let me join him in his lovely house with a grand piano and a backyard, and it's just charming conversation all the time. So David and I spent, 2.5, 3 years as roommates. So we're very, we have a lot of history.
Great, and that all started way back here at CLOC.
Yeah.
You mentioned Woody Howard, the work director. Val, can you just remind those of us who don't remember or don't know what a work director is?
Gosh, I'm going to throw that to David because I think David Weiler. Well, a work director is someone who takes care of the property, cleans the trash, pulls brush that, stuff grows there. It just encroaches on all of the outdoor showers, which impedes, people's enjoyment of taking a shower in the au naturel kind of, when you've got vines and ferns and mosses growing on your feet. And Woody's in there cleaning with bleach, making sure everything's, pristine. But he was a groundskeeper, and mostly he hosted parties after the performances.
He also had to keep track of all the students who had work jobs. Everybody contributes and does work jobs. And I can remember people not showing up from their work job and Woody coming to the back patio and his booming baritone calling for someone. David Wood, you're late!
Yes. We really should say, too, that Woody was a very fine singer. He'd been in the vocal company for several seasons in the 1970s and I think in the early 80s. Big strapping baritone who sang many, many leading roles, everything from Nathan Detroit to Jim Kenyon in Rosemarie to Sir Lancelot in CLOC's premiere of Camelot, and then went on for many years as the work director and really the director of plant and property. He was indispensable to be an Ursula in so many ways, and was a big brother parent to all of us who were just a little bit younger, and then went on and had his own very successful career in theater education at the Horace Mann School in New York City, and he's now retired.
But before he went to Horace Mann, he had a Broadway show.
Oh, right. Which one?
Smile.
Oh, right.
He did Smile, which is, if you've never heard of Smile, listen to it because there's a wonderful song about Disneyland in it. Disneyland, I'm going to Disneyland. No, David, no jazz hands. It's very introspective. And
It
Those
was a
were my
great show.
better hands, Val.
I have a wonderful Woody memory. He had a wicked wit, and we were doing Song of Norway. That I think it was a CLOC premiere, and it was really beautiful. All that Edvard Grieg music.
Who conducted that, David?
I believe David Weiler conducted that.
Thank you.
Yes, with that incredibly brilliant piano in the pit for all those Grieg piano concertos. And I say that with great sarcasm as far as the pit piano.
Yes, it was a Baldwin acrosonic that had seen many a better day many days earlier.
So I walk into the kitchen and Woody starts singing "Song of Norway when the wind comes whipping down the fjords," which of course is, we know, the great Oklahoma tune. But that was the way Woody was. Things just popped into his head.
That's
but
great.
You know, I remember in 1982, Valerie, I think your two shows, Sorcerer and Fiddler on the Roof, were late in the season. David was Wellington Wells, and then he was Tevye. And as I recall, David had a leading role almost every week. And then the last show of the summer was CLOC's premiere of Where's Charlie, great Frank Lesser musical, which I also was very privileged to conduct. Sari Ketter directed. And we had some people that had to leave the company early that year, and this was right at the end of the season. So Valerie and Matt Dolph stayed and sang in the chorus. David sang the role of Mr. Spetague and was really so popular as one of CLOC's leading comics that I still remember. Here it was, the end of the season. The moment David walked out on stage, the entire audience burst into applause before he even had a chance to say a word.
That's a very sweet memory.
Yes, it is.
And you know who I can't forget is the guy who played Charlie, Dan Klotz.
Yes.
I believe he's a TV writer, a movie writer on the West Coast now, and he changed his name. But he was magnificent.
Yes.
So David Ward, can you talk to us a little bit about how After CLOC, how that shaped your trajectory or your career?
It made me realize how serious it was. You know, when I went to the College of Worcester, I was a religion major with a poli-sci minor. I thought I was going to go into seminary or law school. And going to CLOC completely turned my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, I want to be in show business. I really like this. And it really spoke to me. And everyone's like, well, of course you went into show business. I was apparently the only one who didn't know it. But I think it taught me about how serious the whole process was. You know, I'll never forget Sari Ketter, one of the stage directors there for a long time, would post these detailed notes about character and history and all this information that we didn't do on the stage, but it so informed what we were doing. And that was the first time I had run into that. And I thought it was fascinating. You know, one of the other great things was so many of my members of the vocal company were not theater majors back then. I would say a majority of us were not music majors and things like that. Maybe half and half. But so it taught me a lot about the kind of pre-work you have to do before you hit the stage. You know, it also taught me something. I was notorious with my line learning. I had a difficulty learning lines. No, not a difficulty, but I guess I had those 2 summers, I had a lot of lines to learn. And so they used to say, oh yeah, we give David the plot synopsis and he takes a show from there. You know, and I remember Matt Dolph sitting me down when we were doing, funny thing happened on the way to the Forum because I was playing Pseudolus, and he said, every word has to be perfect because it's Sondheim. So I'm like, okay, I'll learn every word. Though, I have to share this story. So we were doing Iolanthe, and I was playing Private Willis in the second act, and it was the final night, and Val's in the pit conducting, and I start the second act, the top with the Private Willis sings the song, went all night long, and first verse went fine. Second verse, I went up, which meant I couldn't remember the words. Not a clue. And she started trying to throw me words, and I kept singing, but I wasn't singing the words she was throwing. And I just kept improvising, and she just went, oh, what's the point? And after I finished, Barb Brown, the choreographer, was in the back of the theater, and I believe with David Briskin, who was an associate conductor. Now he's a big-time ballet conductor. And one of them I think she turned to him and said, "I'll give you $1 if you can tell me what he just sang." And he's like, "What? It was fine." He goes, "No, it wasn't. But every line rhymed. I made sure that every line rhymed. So people were like, I think that was right. Was there a problem?" Anyway, I don't know. How did I get off on that story? What I learned.
Learning lines.
What I learned about was like, wow, again, you have to do the work before you get to the stage. And that means a lot of time by yourself studying lyrics and studying dialogue. And that was really invaluable for me.
Yeah, it's a very important lesson. I think we're still teaching it today.
Yeah.
Val, is there anything that you can think of that CLOC changed in your trajectory?
Oh, I don't know if it changed anything in my trajectory, but it certainly gave me skills and honed the skills I didn't really even know I had of time management. I didn't realize that there are people in the world who don't know how to plan a rehearsal. If you're given a period of time and you have to get through this much material, they just sort of start and hope it works out. I would sit with my material and sing through the songs myself, saying, okay, now that's going to take about 15 minutes to teach the altos and the sopranos, and well, they're already going to know it because the associate has taught that, so they know their music. So now we're talking about and I would be able to down to the minute plan my rehearsals, which was crucial and very crucial at CLOC, because how many hours do we have to put up a show, David? What is it? Like 27?
My paperwork, it's right in front of me because I keep track.
It's some stupid number like 27.
I was going to say 18. Maybe. It's longer than 18. Okay, Mark's saying no, it's longer than 18. But it's
Nothing.
Not a lot.
No, I think it is. It's 20, 25, 27. I can get the exact numbers. We can scroll it across the screen.
That's too many.
Anyway,
shorten it.
I was very good at it, and when we came to Sitzprobe, which is the orchestra vocal rehearsal on Saturday, I never ever didn't do all the musical numbers that I wanted to do because I had planned it out. And this really helped me in working professionally, because similar things happen in the professional world. They say, you've got 3 hours for this rehearsal. What they don't tell you is that every hour you lose 10 minutes due to union breaks. And so the first time I did a professional rehearsal without, it's CLOC, we just go 3 hours. 3 hours, great. Here's my list of what. Oh, no. You got 30 minutes of coffee time in there. And I had to, really turbocharge the last hour, but I got it all done. But yeah, time management was something that I really learned at CLOC.
Great. David Weiler, was CLOC a formative place for you?
Yes, absolutely. In every way I don't know where to start. And I would echo what Valerie said. I learned so much about time management and organization, how to plan a rehearsal, so that even when I go back into the academic setting where we may have weeks and weeks before we perform a concert, an individual rehearsal will be planned in small increments of, we're going to work on these few pages of this piece today, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 20 minutes here, etc. But CLOC opened so many doors for me because I had that first experience as an associate conductor in 1980. 1 year later, I was about to enter my second year of graduate school, and I was given an assistantship as the director of the opera chorus at the University of Illinois, because they knew that I had stage choral experience. And then from there, I went home to Fullerton, California for a year, and I was doing music education coursework in order to be a licensed public school music teacher. And they were doing a production of La Traviata. And because of my experience at Illinois and at CLOC, I was hired as the opera chorus master there. And then when I was hired at UNLV, I still remember very clearly, this was just almost exactly 36 years ago. In my interview, they were very, very interested in all of my musical theater background because they wanted to increase their activity in the musical theater genre. So all of those things came into play. And then being thrown into the deep end, so to speak, even before you're ready. It was 1980 when one of the CLOC conductors became ill, very ill, and on 5 days' notice, I had to prepare and conduct rehearsals and performances for the premiere of a Viennese operetta, The Dollar Princess. Well, I'd never conducted a Viennese operetta in my life, but I already, just within those few short weeks of being an associate conductor, was already learning skills about how to analyze a score, how to mark a score, how to make interpretive decisions, and then how to plan the rehearsal. So I got through it. I believe F. Paul Driscoll, in his delightful book celebrating the 25th anniversary of CLOC, described the experience and said that I emerged from the pit bloody but unbowed. So, and that's very true. I was way over my head, but I'll treasure that experience forever because time and time again, the same thing would happen. About 10, 15 years ago at UNLV, I was preparing the choruses for a performance of the Brahms Requiem with the Las Vegas Philharmonic, our professional orchestra in town. And 2 days before the performance, the conductor of the symphony called and he said, "David, I am ill and my doctor will not allow me to conduct this weekend's performance of the Brahms Requiem. Can you be ready?" Well, I'd been preparing the choruses, but to suddenly find out that that evening I would have an orchestra rehearsal threw me into CLOC mode, high gear. I closed my office door and studied like crazy in every way. And I had Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday morning with the orchestra and conducted the Brahms Requiem Saturday night for a capacity crowd of over 1,000 people. And again, I attribute my ability to adapt and to persevere and to thrive because of everything that I learned at CLOC.
That's great. It also is a really nice segue into the next question I wanted to ask. And maybe Val, I'll throw this to you first. If you could tell us all a little bit about your process when you approach a piece. And by process, not only what do you do logistically, but how you approach it from an artistic perspective.
Well, in my career, I've not been asked to do any new material. I'm always recreating something that someone has spent hours at the table with the creatives, and they've worked out all the nuts and bolts. So I'm basically, my career has been recreating musicals. So I'm not sure I can answer that question as well as I could answer, what do you do when you're asked to present a musical?
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is. I think a lot of our audience maybe is unfamiliar with what it means to take a show on the road and where that work comes from. And speaking as someone who did a lot of remounting of opera in Germany, where sometimes you're handed a book. And this is the 1992 Traviata, and it's back on the list this year, so make it work, and here's the book. And that's a process I think that many people outside of the arts community are unfamiliar that even exists. So can you talk us a little bit through that process?
I think I've only been involved in mounting new productions of something at regional theaters like North Shore Music Theater, the Sacramento Music Theater, the Muni, where they say, okay, this year we're going to do The Wizard of Oz. I opened the Muni a couple seasons ago with The Wizard of Oz, and they said, we would like to do the version that was done in London last year. Okay, here's your materials, go. What do you need from us? So I would look through all the materials, and it's scored for 58 pieces. Well, the Muni has the ability to hire 30, which is large, but I had to decide which 28 pieces were going to be eliminated and how we would do that. And, it's not, you can't just say, I don't need that third trumpet, because that third trumpet has a very important harmonic structure to the integrity of the music. So all of his notes have to be played by someone else. And this is the big job, is that you basically have to reorchestrate certain sections so that it sounds good. Or even like what we did at CLOC, B would always come to certain conductors and say, I can't hear the singers over the orchestra. The music is too loud. I can't hear the singers. And there is a trick, and it's called making room for the voice. And you eliminate the instruments that are playing in the same range that the voice is, so that you can hear the voice. But until you have the opportunity to try that, like at CLOC, where you go, okay, flutes, don't double the melody. We don't need that. She's got the melody. All of a sudden now you have a space for the voice and you can hear it. And I learned this trick in professional theater, where many very good, Jonathan Tunick, Bill Brown, they leave a space for the voice. And when you are reducing orchestras, or like at CLOC, they say, well, let's do this show. And it's got 6 saxophones. Well, there was a time when nobody played saxophones in the orchestra at CLOC. Now, not so much, because you can get sax played. But Woody, by the way, played sax for me in, what was it, Dames at Sea?
Oh my God.
Yes, Woody and Marcy. Marcy got off her bassoon and played a sax. It was not worthy of a recording, but it did just fine. Anyway, so I'm forced to
I think, if memory serves me correctly, that lovely debut performance of HMS Pinafore that I did as an associate conductor in 1980, David Bradley, who was an associate conductor at the time, I believe he played saxophone in the pit of Pinafore to cover a missing instrument.
there. So
Just thought I'd say that.
we have to do that. And at CLOC, because we're limited to the number of musicians, it happens all the time. And that's a skill that you would never, it's like learning a new program on your computer. Until you have a project that you need to learn the new program for, you say, I'll learn that when I have some free time. No, you'll never do it. You have to be pressured into learning how to do it. So that's one of the things I did. But mostly with my Broadway touring, I was merely taking a roadworthy version. The sets were different. The show is pretty much the same, but the set had to tour, which means they had to come down and take apart. And maybe they reduced the number of people in the show, so there was some overlapping. But the music pretty much stayed the same, at least back in the old days. And we would pick up orchestras and just play it, and we got what was already written, which was nice. It was a nice change of pace. I didn't have to do all that extra work, but.
Can you think, Val, of a project that you're maybe most proud of, or that was something that sticks out in your career?
Oh, I think there are 2 that stick out. My first foray with West Side Story, I became, after playing the keyboard and was the associate conductor, I became the full-time conductor of a production in Europe with all American performers and a full orchestra. We had 5 woodwinds playing all of the woodwind parts. It was just absolutely glorious. and it's like the Bible over there. You can't touch it. Everybody loves it. They know all the stories. They know the lyrics. And that was that was marvelous. That was the early '90s for me. And then my next big wow was conducting The Lion King and becoming the musical director for The Lion King. That show is just it's different. It's visceral. It's got pop. It's got African rhythmic tunes. It's got languages I never thought I would learn. All of these click languages that I can't click for the life of me. I cannot click. I also can't roll my R's in a Spanish R. But I tried my damnedest. And Lion King, yeah, that was pretty much those two.
That's great. Thanks. David Weiler, I'm going to pivot over to you and ask, as our professor on the panel, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about the artistic process within academia and where that overlaps and maybe where it's a bit different from what a professional career might be?
You know, on first thought, Mark, I'm not sure if there is a big difference. Quality preparation is quality preparation. And so in the academic world, you know, most of my career has been focused on choral music, a lot of smaller pieces, you know, a piece of music that maybe is only 3 to 5 minutes in length, which becomes part of a full concert, as well as major works with orchestra. But every one of those pieces of music needs background research about the composer, the style, the era in which they lived, and then just good analysis of the music itself and making decisions. I would say that's the same thing that I do when I have the opportunity to conduct musical theater. So pretty much the same, really, in overall.
How do you approach, say it's a new semester and you have a fresh crop of students and you're staring down, Mozart's Requiem or something, and you know that you're going to have a group maybe of varying exposure to certain styles and certain things. How do you communicate, what you want from the piece, or how does that process work?
Well, I suppose it's establishing some basic principles of what kind of sound I want to hear out of my chorus. Basic principles of phrasing and articulation, how we join things together. Is it smooth? Is it more rhythmic? Those kinds of things. And then picking selected moments from the score and start rehearsing those so that we all start to sort of develop a group vocabulary and say, okay, now we've learned this principle, let's apply it now to this next movement or to this next section. So it's scaffolding, really, building step by step until we get the whole. But, I think too about the little bit, my experience through musical theater has not been in the professional realm like Valerie and David, but being so interested in stage work, going all the way back to high school, I think that my choral performances have some element of that stage energy, because my choruses are generally known for singing with a lot of rhythmic vitality, with a lot of diction, which I'm fiercely passionate about at CLOC, as well as when I'm doing, unaccompanied music of the Renaissance period, whatever. Well, maybe not so much in the Renaissance, it's not as crucial then, but the elements of performing and sharing with an audience in a theatrical fashion certainly imbue the way I teach. It all comes together.
And I'll ask the same question: Is there a project or two that stick out to you as wow, that was really something amazing?
I have thought about that, and there really isn't a single project. I think for me, it's more, I'm at a time in my life where I'm doing a lot of reflection upon my entire career. And I think for me, what stands out for me is Well, I had a realization many years ago that I am not going to be as famous or well known as many of my other colleagues in the choral profession or academic profession. And I'm not going to be as famous or well known as many of my students. And I came to a realization that I feel good about that because I have some students that are setting the world on fire. And it's nice to know that maybe I planted an early seed. So that's maybe the thing I'm most proud of, is that there are people around the country, maybe around the world, that studied with me for maybe just a semester or a year, or someone like, well, people always refer to Eric Whitacre, who spent 7 years at UNLV and now is an internationally known composer and conductor, and also conducted for many summers at CLOC, and still treasures his CLOC experiences. So I think it's important to learn what your role in life is. And I think that's where I am now, knowing that I love being a teacher.
That's great, David. David Ward, do you want to talk a little bit about your process, maybe as a stage director, or you do a lot of coaching as well, correct?
Sure, yeah, and it's funny because my process when I coach students is different than when I'm working with a stage, with a show. You know, when it's a show, I do the research on the period, on the history of the show. A lot of the material I work with over the years, and I've lost count, I've directed 60 or 70 different shows in the last 10 years, and almost all of them I have a relationship with. You know, I have you asked about favorite projects or things I'm proud of. I'm thinking of that Merry Widow that David Weiler and I did several seasons ago at CLOC, and it was just magnificent. All the pieces came together, you know. The Gentlemen Prefer Blondes that I did with Beth Burrier, I love the show because when I was a boy, I saw it with Carol Channing, and a classmate of mine was the son of Peter Palmer, who was playing opposite Carol Channing in that show at the Palace Theater on Times Square. And I loved the show. I was enraptured. And so when I looked at Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, it's a massive book, and there's, you know, it was done for Broadway, all these scenes, and I said, all right, cut, and I started cutting things. And I said to Beth, can we make this transition here without these scenes, because it'll just move the show along. And that was a really fun collaboration, and it really worked out well. And it was an old period, and the kids had fun with it. And for me, that is so important. You know, life is difficult. Show business is really hard. And I say, listen, you're not going to get rich doing this, so you might as well have fun. You know, and that to me is really important, because if they're having fun, the audience is having fun. You know, and I still think of funny moments through that show when the whole chorus would sing one little theme from, you know, a solo as the curtain was closing. Her name was Mame, and they loved it. They had fun. So I do all that historical research. I rely on a lot of what I have experienced in the past. I'm an intuitive, so I go with how it hits me here, how it hits me in my heart, almost every time. I trust my instinct implicitly or explicitly. I'm not sure which is appropriate. But if it touches me, I know it's working. And if it's not touching me, I'm like, okay, what can we do to make this work? Because for me, the most important thing is, how do we tell the story? The story is the most important thing. You know, I've done a lot of shows with multiracial casting, because as far as I'm concerned, colorblind casting that's the only way to go, because I don't care what the color of someone is. I care what they bring to the character and what they bring to the story, you know? So that's where I go with the story. I will say there's 2 other shows I'm really proud of. I was at the University of North Texas in Denton, north of Dallas, for 2 years. And we did a production of Virgil Thompson's The Mother of Us All. And it's a very strange piece. Gertrude Stein wrote the libretto. It's a very weird piece. And the kids are like, what is this? I said, we're just going to keep going through it and look for the meaning, because it's in there. And it introduced a period of history to the students that I don't think they'd had a lot of experience with, you know, the suffragette movement and the achievement of women's rights. But I'm so proud of the way we brought it together, and the ending was very impactful. Susan B. Anthony is now a statue, and as she's singing her final monologue about what she's brought to the world and what she hopes to achieve for women, we were projecting all these images of women in American history and international history that have brought things to the table. And it was really powerful because it just made sense. I felt like we told the story. I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of a production of the dialogue of the Carmelites we did. Because it told this beautiful, tragic story. And part of our process was we found some Carmelite nuns who had a relationship to someone at the school. And so we had a Zoom meeting before it was necessary with all of the cast and these Carmelite nuns who told us about what their life was like and how they lived in the world. And they had very strong connections to this story because it's a true story based on the Sisters of Compiègne. I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly. But it was a beautiful thing to see these students take it on, and then to thank the sisters, the women sang one of the Ave Marias from the piece. And it was just, I think that's why we do it, because suddenly two groups of people touched each other so intimately and so deeply. And that's what I love. That's why I direct, you know.
Yeah.
I really believe that music will heal our broken world, and it's in moments like that that I see it happen.
That's great. I do want to ask you all a last question as we get ready to wrap up. And Val, maybe I'll swing around to you to start off. If you could give yourself a piece of advice, the 20-year-old self, what would it be?
Since musical theater comes so easy to me, for various reasons, people tend to think I'm cavalier and that I don't come from a background of depth. It seems very surface. And so I would say to myself, just don't be so, be aware that you come off cavalier when you toss things off as being so easy to do. It's not easy for other people, and you have to flaunt it. Just don't flaunt it in their face. Just do your job and just be a little bit more humble, I guess.
That's very good advice, I think, for all of us in theater. be more humble. The humble David Ward, what would you say to the 20-year-old David Ward?
First, I would say, learn your words. You know, the studying part is so important, and I had to learn that. It took me through my 20s to really learn that and get that, but I did. The other thing is, and I think this is really hard for young performers, it's not about you as a person when you're going into an audition or when you're doing a job. They want to see what you're bringing to the table. But we take it all so personally as performers. Oh, they don't like me. Oh, they don't think I'm any good. That's not the situation. They're looking at a bigger picture, and how does each person fit into the picture? And if you book the job and you're lucky, you fit in the picture. If you don't book the job, it's not a criticism of you. It's just that someone fit the picture better. I always say to my students, you go to an audition, I'm looking for oranges that day, but all you are bringing is apples. However, if your apple is so special and interesting, I'm like, you know what? I could work with that apple. So I think I wish that people had said, be true to yourself. Trust your gut. And don't make it about you, make it about the project.
That's great advice. David Weiler, what would you advise the 20-year-old David Weiler?
Oh my. Yes. I would say explore more, take more chances, explore more possibilities. And of course, always be prepared for the unprepared. and any setting you're in, do everything you can to present yourself at your very best, not only in terms of your technical preparation, your musical preparation, but your personal preparation. How do you relate to people? How forthright? How honest are you? Are you someone that others would want to spend time with, and someone that others would want to work with? You know, again, it's like what David was saying. What are you bringing to the table? But I think the big thing would be to take more chances and to be more accepting of one's own weaknesses and look at those as opportunities to keep growing.
That's great. Thank you, David. Well, David, Val, thank you all so much for taking time to talk to us.
Was. Can I just say how all three of you have changed my life deeply? I've learned so much from all of you, and not just learned, but just enjoyed you too. And so now I want you to take hands. Take hands. Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya.
You can cut this.
I thought you meant cut it right now.
But yes, thank you all so much. This has been great.
It's
Thank
great.
you, Mark.
People are going to be so thrilled when they see the construction project that's going on at the campus in West Falmouth. I was there, last week? And it's absolutely thrilling to see how CLOC is moving into its second 50 years with this magnificent structure. It's going to be marvelous. And so, Mark, thank you to the board and to you, because you guys have done amazing work. It's really exciting.
Thanks.
And if I had $1 million, I'd give it to you right now.
Off the Clock is part of our larger programming, Digital CLOC. Digital CLOC is made possible by a generous gift from Phil and Liz Gross. If you'd like to learn more about our programming or how you can become a supporter, visit us at collegelightoperacompany.com. Tune in again next week for another episode of Off the Clock.